The Japan Foundation Manila presents Virtual Book Launching of Art Archive 3 Collection of Essays on Philippine Contemporary Music and Design. A message from the Director of the Japan Foundation Manila.
Greeting from the Japan Foundation Manila. I'm happy to welcome you all to the virtual book launching of Art Archive 3. This third volume of the Art Archive series explores the current trends and concerns in the Philippine contemporary music and design. Both genres have been drawing much attention locally and globally, but there is little publication to give an outline of the current states and interpret their background for the global readers. Featuring 16 esteemed contributors writing about their fields of expertise, we hope this publication will serve as a resource for our readers, thereby contributing constructively to the international dialogue and promotion of contemporary art in the Philippines. Art Archive 3 and the rest of the volumes are published in digital format for accessibility and distribution. You can download them for free on our official website. I'd like to give many thanks to everyone behind this publication. Our editors, Professor Jose Buen Consejo for music section, and architect Gerry Torres and Leonido Hines Jr. for design section. All the contributors and our editorial team, this would have not been possible without everyone's time and effort. This year has not been easy for most of us. Amid the challenges, we believe the international collaboration has much more importance in opening avenues to find innovative ways to solve the adversities we are facing. Our unity is our strength. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much for your attention.
Content Introduction from the Section Editors.
Hi, I'm Gerry Torres. I'm an architect and I am presently the director and curator of the Center for Campus Art of the De La Salle College of St. Benilde. The CCA, or what we call the center, is a unit that has been tasked to produce, curate, and manage exhibits for the school. Our shows explore the intersections of design, art, community, societies, and the environment. And one of our last shows was called Alon. It was an exhibit that focused on the dangers of marine plastic waste and also tried to investigate why the Philippines has been identified as one of the top three most pollutant countries in the world when it comes to plastics. We create these shows because we want to create awareness among our students and possibly action in the future because we have a big design and art school. When Mariko asked me to edit this anthology on design in the Philippines, I readily said yes because I felt that it would be a good opportunity for us to talk about design in the context of the environment. I feel that it is a topic that is long overdue. I asked my co-faculty, architect June Hines, to be my co-editor as I felt that he would have valuable contributions to the conversation. June and I agreed that the themes of climate change and sustainability would be appropriate frames for the essays on design. We went through nearly a dozen names, but the final list of designers that we came up, I feel, gives us a good picture of design in the Philippines in 2020. June?
So thank you, Gerry. The full brief we gave the designing writers was about really about how the design professions are responding to questions and issues of sustainability or volatility in the Philippines today and in the future. We believe that the connections between social responsiveness and social responsibility and the physical production of sustainable products are very tight. It is often the designer as thinker and the designer as producer who create not just the products but also the discourse for consumers of information, media, objects, habitats, and even culture and the environment as a whole. So we gave them a few questions to ponder on. Let me just go ahead and read them. So one question is, how ready are the designs of our products and infrastructure and the modes by which they are communicated or produced for volatile change. How sustainable will they be? Are there paradigmatic or model design principles that are tenable to both human adaptation and resilience? So, this design industry in the Philippines faces many challenges that are not just about aesthetics, but also practicality and long term sustainability. And so, we constantly ask, have designers provided the agenda for these innovations and productions that will also pave the way for the synergy of the aesthetic, the practical, and the responsive? And so at this point, I'd like to turn you now to our essay writers as they can narrate for themselves their own responses to these questions. Thank you.
Contributors of Design section.
My name is Khadka, and this is Alex Furunes, and today we'll present to you our understanding of mutual support, our paper called Understanding of Mutual Support.
Mutual support exists in many forms around the world and has been a means for communities to support themselves through different seasons, natural disasters, and conflicts. These traditions are fading away in our modern day society, where the currency of wealth is measured by money rather than the relationships that we build around us. The Norwegian dugnad is called for in moments of restoration, maintenance, or management of organizations. Historically has contributed to shape Norwegians' modern day labor unions and the reconstruction efforts after the Second World War. The Filipino Bainian is mainly practiced within the villages whenever local communities need to make a collective effort to build schools, host weddings, and funerals, amongst other things.
In our work, we are trying to learn from and integrate the principles of mutual support to develop an alternative way of creating architecture, considering the standard phases of design of a typical project, from planning to conceptualization to design and the eventual construction. We aim to synthesize a method of working which allows for a greater integration of the values, knowledge, and resource of a community at the inception of a project. So the goal of these first three steps is to form a common language that becomes a framework for meaningful engagement between all members of the project team. So when architecture is conceptualized in terms that a community can directly engage with, it allows for deeply shared meanings to be ascribed to architecture, which can then reflect and reinforce a community's identity over time.
So through drawings and different activities such as model making, full-scale mock-ups, and prototyping, a community begins to develop a common language to express and negotiate ideas and solutions that matters to them. The objects made through these activities becomes representations of these ideas, these values and meanings embedded in the process. This process requires externalizing one's own thoughts so that they can be discussed and processed through a collective deliberation.
So throughout history, mutual support has been used by local communities in times of crisis and natural disaster. Its principles are rooted in empathy, care, and seeing ourselves in one another. These are some projects we have applied where we have applied the principles of mutual support in various contexts globally. And with this, we'd hope to demonstrate that the principles of mutual support can be applied to the architectural design process in order to expand the diversity of values represented by a community's architecture. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. This sharing is an epilogue of sorts to my paper entitled Design Solutions that Alternative Lifestyles Contribute to Sustainability. Modern city commercial structures eerily remain closed since the March 15, 2020 lockdown. This revalidates this paper's thesis and that this lockdown is an adverse response to the overproliferation of unsustainable infrastructures brought about by over-consumerism and greed. Jane Goodall, a famous primatologist, has said that nature has stricken back and that the forest has leaped over into us through the coronavirus. It is very obvious that the sustainable architecture through bamboo architecture is indeed now an antidote to this pandemic. In this paper, we talked about the Freedom Memorial entry by Paulo Alcazaren, his staff, and myself. This entry in a contest featured a 10-story high bamboo spiraling tower staircase. After the contest, Alcazaren decided to follow through by creating a 5-meter high spiral staircase of bamboo. I interpreted this for him, and it is called Kawayan. Kawayan stood at the grounds of the anthology exhibit in February 2020 in Fort Santiago, Intramuros, Manila. Anthology 2020 was an exhibit, cum conferences and workshops for architects. Two factors surprised me greatly while participating in Anthology 2020. One was a conference speaker declared that architecture was a mere product, a commodity. For me, that meant that architecture was sucked out of soul and spirit, and this disturbed me greatly. It was hard to take. But the contrary surprise was one of pure joy. People really took to climbing up and interacting with Kawayan. Kawayan stayed put months beyond the exhibit's 3 days. Alcazarian staff and Fort Santiago staff enthused that people really enjoyed and hung out with Kawayan, climbing up and down, exploring the underbelly, posing, taking selfies, hanging out on its benches. Indeed, during these times that I visited, I saw this for myself. And fast forward, Alcazarian graciously agreed to donate Kawayan as a permanent exhibit. I volunteered to help maintain it for the years to come. It is heartening to see that the public is enjoying a vernacular piece of bamboo architecture as a very friendly and sustainable piece in beautiful Fort Santiago, and so appreciated by the Filipino people. Thank you.
I'm Lulu Tan-Gan, an artisanal designer. First, I would like to thank Japan Foundation Manila, Gerry Torres, for inviting me to be part of this Filipino creative. As one of the authors, it will further give me this opportunity to inspire aspiring designers that craft can be innovated into design. I started with knitwear in the early 80s, and by that time, I have tried to go as green and clean to make fashion. I was both amazed by the Filipino hand skills and the looms that did not require electricity. I would design and knit out of my own fabrics rather than buying mass-produced textiles. When the 2000 year arrived, I yearned to innovate contemporary Filipino fashion. Most designers and retailers opted for Western-influenced fashion. I thought that we were losing our weaving tradition, in particular the use of piña, a pineapple fiber. Piña textile that is indigenous all the way from farming to finished product. Already an established ready-to-wear designer at that time, I thought that giving back is to market piña wear in the westernized ready-to-wear mall culture that we have in the Philippines, or at least in Manila. I took risks in business and challenges in production, but all went well if you persist and if you believe in what you're doing. 35 years later, from the time that I started, we hear so much about sustainability, which is now, and now we might not even have a choice. We must take our Mother Earth seriously. I hope I can influence this generation to design only sustainable fashion, supporting hand skills, making and buying Filipino, and staying green and clean. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dan Matutina.
And I'm dancing.
We'll talk about wading in plastic, our packaging dilemma from the view of graphic design.
So when we read about the report about the Philippines being one of the plastic polluters in the world, it really served as a wake-up call for us designers in the Philippines and those who work with entrepreneurs. So this essay, we wanted to start another conversation with entrepreneurs that we work with, and as well as graphic design studios that we wanted to understand from their point of view how they are trying to minimize waste, and at the same time, how do they deliver the experience of the products that they design for. So in the essay, we spoke to clients, and we looked into studies that were done locally of how we consume and purchase materials and these other habits that are obvious in our local context.
I guess the next part of what we're talking about is not part of the essay, but when Dang and I were talking about what we wrote and how it applies now, it's sort of a different situation right now. So looking at what's happening with businesses shifting to, food businesses shifting to doing all deliveries and takeaways. We had a few questions, and in the time of pandemic and delivery, we thought, how are entrepreneurs and small businesses adapting to the current situation while maintaining the quality of their food offering? So it changed a bit, because before, most of the plastic waste and physical waste that we had were from yung mga sachet, tingi-tingi. But now there's a bit of difference. Like some restaurants who didn't do takeaway before, like for example, a ramen shop who didn't allow takeaway, now they're doing packed ramen that you can bring home. But they do it to maintain the freshness of the food, but it also adds to the plastic waste that we're experiencing now.
And how are shops that encourage you to bring your own containers use less packaging materials? And how are they doing now? Because I understand in these shops, we actually can go bring our own bags and purchase these materials without extra packaging materials. And so how do they deliver these services now, considering the utmost safety also of consumers? So that one is that it's an understatement to say how things have changed so much since the start of the pandemic and now, but these are things that we also wanted to consider finding out as a continuing conversation with the designers that we work with and with entrepreneurs that we also continue working with as they try to adapt to these huge shifts and changes.
Thank you.
And hello, everyone. So I was wondering if I had the energy to prepare something new for this presentation. Then I realized I did not have the energy to present anything new for this presentation. So I'll just read the abstract that I submitted for the essay. So here it is. Throughout the relatively recent history and still ongoing development of small press publishing, zines are still the most accessible, the most immediate, and the most egalitarian expression of printed thought available to all. In short, zines are cheap to make, zines are quick to make, and anybody with pen and paper and scissors and tape can make them. It is this simplicity of production that allows the zine and the zinester who makes them to evolve through the times and adapt to the spaces they continue to find themselves in again and again. The essay seeks to outline the historical and cultural conditions that gave rise to the modern-day practice and aesthetic of zine making in the Philippines, and examine distribution systems that zinesters have been using since the form's inception and continue to use to this day. The essay is also an attempt to demonstrate the zine's potential to challenge fake news and black propaganda in social media by stimulating or establishing specialized spaces called information districts in local communities in real life.
Discussion of the design section.
Sudar was in the midst of preparations for the Biennale, and I think that has been, I don't know what has happened since then, but Alex can share with us what happened to that project.
So I think Alex, you're still on mute now, but yeah. So we'll share a bit. I think from our end, the project that we were doing in Bulacan was happening actually. So, we're creating a pavilion for the exhibition in Venice, and we did that project with the community in Bulacan. So we started that around November last year, but then it reached until about February this year. So sort of the pandemic happened sort of like towards the tail end of our process, and at a certain point, Alex even was not able to come to the Philippines for one of the last trips so that we could finish the building, just because he couldn't leave due to having like these restrictions because of the pandemic. So, but gladly that's now complete. The pavilion. We were able to ship it, and it's waiting in a warehouse in Venice there. Supposedly to be built in May this year. Due to again the pandemic and further delays, what happened was they decided to postpone it to initially October. Alex, was it right? October this year, supposedly.
29th of August.
August this year, but then we moved it fully to May next year. So right now we just finished the catalog as we were discussing earlier, but there's still a lot of other things that we need to finish at the same time.
Sorry, maybe I need to explain a bit. Alex and Sudar have been selected to be our representative in the Philippine Pavilion of the Venice Architecture Biennale. And I think this is our third time to participate. And so Alex, Sudar, we're still looking at November as the opening.
No, May next year.
May next year. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Alex, if you want to say something, please do.
I can say that actually what has been interesting with what happened with the Venice Biennale in relation to the pandemic is that before the initial postponement of the dates, there was a lot of pressure by the different national curators to postpone the opening because a lot of nations were actually unable to send their exhibition or coordinate construction, all these different complications that were the consequence of the closing down of different borders and everything. So a lot of the curators started organizing themselves. So there's now a coordinated effort by about 13 national pavilion to do something collaboratively, because through these kind of connections that we built in establishing or pushing this for this postponement. But I think there'll be something very interesting for the next Venice Biennale, which is this kind of cross-national collaboration between national curators. So keep your eyes open for that.
Congratulations.
And if you can just tell us the process that you went through in connection also with the essay that you wrote, and how that becomes a really good important factor in making or trying to include process as a first principle for design.
You want to go, Sudar?
You start.
Okay. Because I think what's interesting with these two words that we're looking at, the Norwegian one and the Filipino one, the dugnad and the bayanihan, is that these are traditions that exist all over the world, and these are ways for us to cope in face of calamities or disasters. And we've heard the word being used a lot, both bayanihan but also dugnad, in these pandemic times. But what's important with these traditions is that it's something that these are ways of organizing oneself amongst equals, So sometimes you also realize that some people are using the word in a slightly controlling and manipulating way. So it's a very interesting time to see how these words are being used now. But from where me and Sudar is coming with these words is that we've been working with different communities for about 10 years, seeing how these could be ways to create projects with the resources and knowledge that's already there in the place that we're working, and start from that. Although maybe there is no financial basis yet, there's other ways to start a project and other ways to invest time, social relations, all these other resources that we have to create something for our built environment. So yeah, that's like why I could contribute to that.
Yeah, I think another aspect of this is that when we're engaging with the community, we always get the questions like from when from people that they say isn't it like two professionals just trying to come into the community and trying to just override what their wishes are and what their knowledge is and all of that. So it's like some people see it as a form of oppression, that we are there to give something to the community or to overpower the community with what we want to do. But in our case, we strongly believe that the power to do something is not only inherent in someone who has some sort of a specific set of knowledge, because I think the real power in what we try to do is about sharing knowledge with each other. So it's a mutual sharing of this knowledge, which is the foundation for what these projects have to be built on.
Thank you both. I'd like to ask something, although this might be a little bit ahead of what we've been planning on, Gerry and I planning on, but I'd like to go first to Ning. Maybe we can come back to Sudar and Alex in a little bit as well, because Ning and I, when we met first and talked about her essay, I had a lot of insights. I got a lot of insights from the project that she's been working on. And one of these things in connection to the community that Sudar and I were talking about was this whole idea that bamboo is really a material, not just as a resilient material, but also as a community material. And we were discussing, one of the things that I learned from Ning was that when you talk about bamboo or bamboo houses, it was all about some of the misconceptions was a bamboo house is made because you are poor and you belong to this community that's not so privileged at all. So maybe I can ask Ning to say something about that.
Hi. Yeah, it's so nice to hear Sudar and Alex talk no on what they're doing. So inspiring. It reminds me of what we did in 1995, which is some time ago, with OCDS, that's Oxford Center for Disaster Studies. So there was Nick Hall and Roger Bellers. They're from Oxford, and they asked us to partner with them to look for a community that was poor, had women leaders, no warlord, and had a tradition of bamboo architecture. And we found that in Ikbalangao, Antique, and then we went there. Fast forward, what happened was they found out that the bamboo structure was indeed resilient against typhoons. Number two, the tradition makes it very resilient. And then, of course, it was people architecture. Even an 8-year-old kid could do it. What really surprised them was uh, the community was asking about, they were asking the community to explain the connections of the bamboo structure. And we couldn't get answers from them in a proper way. So they said to us, go away first and then come back after 3 days. And after 3 days, they had a whole little bamboo structure done where they could explain all the connections. But, and lastly, one thing that really hit me, which they found out, which I knew all along because of the study on Philippine architecture, was the word holism, which is it couldn't happen. No? This bamboo architecture cannot happen unless there are several layers of consciousness all interacting at the same time. So that's what I'd like to share, especially in relation to Sudar and Alex's sharing.
Thank you, Ning. Thank you. Um, I think it's interesting to continue this thread on community. As architects, we have been educated to believe that we are the sole voice when it comes to projects, and unfortunately, it's still the same paradigm that we propagate in our schools. Admittedly, including in Benil.
Even in your school, even in Benilde,
It's slowly
is that what's
changing.
happening?
It's slowly
Or
changing.
are you getting more ideas as you're interacting with the students? You know, that's
we are
interesting.
we are getting more ideas, but you also have to understand, Ning, that the backgrounds of our faculty in architecture also comes from the traditional architecture schools with their traditional paradigms in education. So it
Okay, yeah.
somehow goes down the line as well. But we're also slowly changing, and we welcome new ideas from architects like Sudar and Alex, and of course you have the magnum opus of traditional Philippine architecture with your book, which I think all schools are still using up to today.
Yeah,
Folk
yeah.
architecture, yeah, it really
Well,
is a
thanks to Hilda, no?
Bible.
Yeah, thanks to Hilda Fernando, but she passed away August
Yes,
27,
yes,
right? Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. I still remember when she told me, okay, I'm going to send you all over the Philippines. Do you know how much I was in cloud nine because of that? And then we went together with Bobby Perez, Father Bobby Perez, to the north. And then after that, with Honorato Paloma of UP Architecture, he's a professor, to the Visayas area. And then he fell out. He couldn't do the book. He got what we call writer's block. And then the south, I couldn't go, but Joseph 14 went and started what's his documenting. That was really exciting.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Ning is the author of a book called Folk Architecture, which is one of the most comprehensive publications when it comes to Philippine folk architecture.
Yeah,
So,
thanks. Yeah.
and continuing the conversation about communities, Perhaps I could skip a bit and go to Lulu. Uh,
Yes.
her proposal for the development of piña focuses also on working with the community of women weavers. So maybe Lulu can share with us how she uh, plans to do this, or if she has done so, how it has been.
So, hi. Uh, right now, the Kenya community, I think they're all passive at the moment, um, since there's not much pop-ups, there is no retail, and in the online business, it's rather quiet. So, but I'm still giving them work to do because I'm a very, I would say, very positive that there is a the pandemic will be over at least in maybe the next 6 months. At the moment
Fingers
in
crossed.
yes, fingers crossed. I think we'll get used to it and fight the virus.
Yes, yes, we will.
Right. I was going to say that in retail or in fashion, it's totally dead, except that if you get into the health related business, which is providing mask and PPE, which I refuse to do. First, I think so many are doing the mask, so I would like to give the chance to a lot of the young aspiring designers that it's something easier for them to do, and they really need the job. Number two, I am against PPE because it's synthetic.
Yeah, plastics,
Uh,
plastic.
The sad part about the pandemic, and in spite of us promoting or creating awareness about sustainability, it's suddenly we're flooded with all these synthetic materials. I think it's a little bit overkill to ask people to wear PPE if you are not with a hospital or a
Yeah.
frontliner.
Mhm, mhm.
Because what does it do? You mean the virus is afraid of the synthetic? I doubt it, right? So
Yeah.
I think an overkill, and I just feel helpless about it. Maybe there's a way for somebody, or maybe to voice it out. But then at the same time, there might be people who are very sensitive about it because it has to do with its health issues,
Mhm.
which I
Yeah.
guess the those that are authorized to speak about it would be the doctors.
Mhm.
Maybe we should find a doctor, right?
uh,
So now
well,
there are more basuras, more masks.
no,
You
I
know,
know. I think, yeah, that's one thing that I have been pondering about since the pandemic. I just realized that plastic production has actually increased, and
yes,
the plastic lobby all over the world has used the pandemic as an excuse to continue, if not increase, plastic production. And
especially
you know,
the food deliveries.
food deliveries, you should see. I mean, one thing that stops me from asking for food to be delivered is the amount of plastic that I know will be used just for the
Right.
delivery. So,
Also because governments are also easing down on the limitations that were set forth initially for us to use plastics. Like Quezon City has already dropped their advocacy against plastic because of the pandemic, and that's the excuse.
yeah, yeah. So, and I think Dan and Dang will also have a say about all of this that's happening. But it really is, I feel sometimes that we've stepped back again in terms of the battle against plastic. But, well, it is what it is. So I think the more we should continue the conversation about sustainability and the environment. But Lulu, I just want to ask you one more thing. In terms of sustainability of piña, uh, looking ahead in the future, are you including production farming of piña as a means to be sustainable in terms of the material, or is
Right.
there enough piña plantations
Yeah.
presently?
Yes. We are trying to the private group. We're trying to work together with some government agencies to encourage more farming of the piña of the pineapple plant itself. Yeah. So that there is a continuous supply. And it's not just the support of piña, but I think also to continuously support craft, local crafts of weaving, of knitting, of crocheting, anything to do with the hands, because it's even, I would say, you don't need any capital except your hands to start working with something. So I'm part of a group, and we've just started a few months ago, and we will eventually start to give workshops, tie up with the LGUs to be able to find groups that are interested, to work with craft, whether they're into weaving or they're into other crafts, because and especially if we can encourage the younger generation that you can turn craft into design or craft into fashion.
Yeah.
Craft can be something that's stale to them, or something that's like luma, or not uso anymore. It's something that's for their grandparents' time. Yeah. So I think as designers, they would find more interest and find the product more interesting and relevant to them. Yeah.
But I think as a counterpoint to the increasingly digital world that we have now, craft would be valuable, and eventually more in terms of value, could even have a higher value than the mass-produced digital products that we have now.
Right. Yeah. We hope to be able to convince the market also, because I think our bigger competitors are the mass-produced fast fashion brands. Yeah. And they really come cheap, because also they paid for very cheap labor in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh. Yeah. So it's very hard to compete with these countries, but therefore it needs also government involvement. Like when I was doing the research last month for our fashion council, I realized that there is a government rule, a law, that's RA number something, which is against ukay-ukay. We're not, we're not supposed to. It's illegal to import ukay-ukay. Can you imagine that? And we're not even knowledgeable about it, and we're not even aware about it.
Really?
So now that we're aware about it, we've got into Zoom meetings with some Congress members, the creatives. We had a Zoom meeting with them, and we're asking them how to go about it. Yeah. So these are areas wherein we feel that we have to involve ourselves to be able to support the local industry, or at least the local makers. Yeah.
I'd like to shift a little bit also to Dan and Dan. Regarding this, Lulu has been talking about talking to other people, but Dan and Dan had been talking about so many people in the industry, in their industry, and if you can share us a little bit, because this industry that you're in is a different kind of community. It's more corporate, and they're producers and distributors at the same time. So if you could share us a little bit of what kind of discourse or ideas that this community is talking about recently during your interviews with them.
I think so. I guess I don't know if I can say interesting, but parang ganun, the interesting that happened, I guess, is the struggle with what's happening now. And when we were writing about it, when we were practicing, graphic design, packaging design, it's almost the same situation. It's just a different permutations of it. Because when we were working with clients and talking to other designers and talking to other producers, the challenge has always been for micro, small, medium companies is to balance sustainability, using sustainable materials versus the cost of producing it. Because the way the industry is set up now is it's cheaper to use non-sustainable products versus sustainable ones. But if you're a small or micro business and you're starting a small business, the most accessible materials are the non-sustainable ones. So in your mind, you'd go for that because it's cheaper and you can start your business and maybe make your business sustainable as well as a business. And then when you look at all the different materials, and one of the interviewees that we talked to was the Theon Fields, most of the sustainable materials are not accessible or not promoted as much because it doesn't sell as much as the non-sustainable materials. And to connect it to what's happening now and in the time of pandemic, also like if you're a small business, I mean, there's a lot of small business that are dead now. Dead na, nagsara na. We have people, small businesses are closed, and some of the businesses who are thriving are into takeaway and deliveries. And the challenge is the best way to deliver the food is to pack it in plastics because someone from Lala Move or Grab will pick it up, and you don't know if it's going to rain or not. And the most optimum, I guess, for made to be food, really, is plastic because you pack everything in different plastic containers, and when it rains, okay, it gets wet, but the product survives. And the example I said earlier was also before, if you go to ramen shops, like yung mga social na ramen shops, you're not allowed to take it away. You have to finish it on the shop. If you take it away, you can't leave it in the shop. But now everyone, adjusted, and all the different like the noodles, the chashu, the soup, they're all in different plastics because it's the optimum way to enjoy it. Because if you put it all in one plastic, overcooking noodles, overcooking pork. So this is an interesting time because of that particular dynamic. But the big corporations, I don't think they're affected. Like the groceries, it's still the same. It's still the same plastic. But uh, like what Jerry said, the challenge now is yun nga, the use of plastic has gone up, and I don't know if there's scientific data behind it. Ano lang siya, anecdotal, and I can say we're also guilty because when deliveries come, parang ganun yung nangyayari ngayon. And yun, I guess to connect it to our essay, that's the connection. And I think Dan can also add something that's a bit connected to what we do.
And so when we spoke to other designers from these design studios, they were also working within the aspirations of the small businesses that they were working with, that they wanted to produce a certain kind of product that speaks of a certain quality. So as much as possible, they also try to balance this with the cost. For example, making jewelry boxes for a jewelry designer or making something exciting for a churros company. So this is pre-pandemic. But even prior then, having seen also articles of efforts made by Design Center of the Philippines, for example, they were creating piñapel, which won the wooden pencil for a DNAD award on sustainability, that they were using discarded pineapple leaves, converting it into handmade paper and making it into packaging, possibly packaging material. But as what they saw for now, it's difficult to produce because it's expensive of the process. But we already have something here available. And also talking to entrepreneurs, as Dan mentioned, what is easily accessible? How can I move my products right now as I try to establish my business? So all these things, it's really a balance or a dance with as BJ
And a half.
of and a half mentioned that at the end of the day, they want to be a sustainable business. And so how do they create that goal in terms of thinking of the concern for the environment and as well as for the consumers and the viability of the business?
Another interesting part, just to add before we end, yung I think you've seen this. It became viral, di ba? There was a pizza shop in Laguna because they weren't able to access paper boxes. They started commissioning the community to make woven pizza boxes, and it was I guess for me, it was inspiring for me that they were able to create something in the community that they produced it. The interesting question now comes wherein people were asking, can you reuse, how do you reuse the like the woven pizza box? Kasi syempre yung mga crumbs pupunta sa sulok-sulok. So parang nice siya that it happened and they were able to create something of it. But there's also the other side of it na is it reusable? I think it is because it's natural. At least it won't add to the pile of waste that you see everywhere.
Thank you, Dan and Dan. Yeah, in terms of materials, I think we also have to remind ourselves that traditionally the Philippines has always been using organic material for many, many centuries, even before the advent of plastic, baskets or weaves. They even say that bahay kubo is a woven basket. So it's something that we should just look back to, and not necessarily cancel it because it's really part of not just our DNA as a people, but also the land, which can produce those materials for us. I'd like to talk to Adam and ask him about his zine community. By the way, I'd just like to share that Adam and I have been working on an exhibit. I had planned an exhibit that was supposed to open early this year, but because of the pandemic, it's now turned into a fully digital exhibit. It is on the life and work of national artist for literature, Cirilo Bautista. It's part of our ongoing series on national artists to create awareness about outstanding art and design and literature of our country. And Adam is one of the artists who have generously agreed to create a zine that is a reaction to Cirilo Bautista's work. But I'd like to ask Adam about his zine community and how are you guys now reacting to this, and especially the fact that, we're talking about volatility, June and but I think these days have been very volatile for all of us. So, and zines is one of the fastest and way of communicating and messaging. So, we want to hear from you, Adam, about this aspect.
Salamat. Well, right now the problem is mainly organizational. Kasi the pandemic has been, I think, been going on for maybe 6 months, 7 months na. The pandemic and the lockdown. Tapos people who make zines are still making zines. People buying zines are still buying zines. People who have been selling zines are still selling zines. But the main problem is really organizing these communities. A great majority of zine production and zine distribution happens in assemblies, expos, conventions, physical manifestations of assemblies of people as a collective, selling and buying and interacting and educating each other. So with a pandemic and under a government who's only too happy to use the pandemic to control mobility of the population, it's a problem. And I'm not as optimistic about the pandemic. I actually think the realistic timeline is probably around 3 to 5 years for it to be okay enough for people to start gathering again in bigger groups all over the country. So that's how I'm thinking about the situation. So as someone who mostly organizes these things, I work with a group called BLTX. It's Better Living Through Xeroxography. So we organize not just expos, but we do that before the pandemic, we used to do that at least twice a year. Then we also do talks, forums, educational discussions about small press publishing and how you can use it to basically to circumvent all the state control that's happening with media and how to be able to broadcast your message across across whatever space you plan to broadcast it across. So a lot of it we do online, but right now I actually detest using Zoom for things. But as a teacher, and I teach creative writing, and I'm forced to use these apps, these programs, these services. But then a lot of these things are being used to surveil us, and we're actually aiding the government to surveil us, to monitor us using these systems. So, and one of the main problems that people who make zines are facing is how most of these groups, most of these organizations, uh, they've been red tagged. They're actually open to actual physical violence purely because they have messages that are detrimental to the government's messaging. So so using Zoom for me at least is not a viable option for one of the main problems is really figuring out how to be able to organize, how to be able to educate and do it in the same way we've been doing it when we do it physically, and when we don't just do it in Manila, we do it in other cities all over the country. So how to organize a national movement of how to do these things again, and keeping in mind that we can't do it physically. We have to do it online.
Adam, the depth ed is very problematic when it comes to the delivery of education to,
Oh
especially
yes.
far from provinces. Do you think the zine and the DIY nature of the zine could have a part in alleviating this problem?
They're actually using a form of it to distribute their textbooks. I'm trying to remember what they call it. But the plan is the learning modules, you can actually pick them up in your barangay, in your local barangay, maybe in the barangay library. So you can take it home and use it. But what DepEd and CHED do, what they actually did is they passed the responsibility to the LGU. So at least as far as I know, last time I checked the memo they sent out, they don't plan to finance the publishing, the printing, even the distribution system. Uh, at the level of the LGU, they actually passed it on to the local barangay librarian to figure it out, to figure out her own system. And as far as I know, it's mostly lending. They don't even manufacture individual copies for individual students. They need to figure out a scheduling process where student A can get the book, and after they use it, they pass it on to student B, student C, student D. So but that one copy gets passed around the barangay, however many students need to use it. So so yeah, I mean, I kind of understand it, why you have to pass it on, but then why you rush these things again? Because again, it's an organizational problem. The DepEd supposedly doesn't have any money for these systems, so they just pass it on to everyone else who actually have less money than the department. So we're all just left flailing. But yeah, I mean, they're actually using it.
Thank you, Adam. That's really amazing. The kind of potential. I can imagine now. I think you also talked about it in your essay.
Yeah.
Of some sort where you actually had to help or had to been asked help from somebody from the Department of Education, and how you can potentially teach them how to actually do it themselves, do the textbooks themselves when there's no budget, right? So I'd like to open this up to everybody. You can butt in anytime you want. Just a little bit on this idea of since we're already in this lockdown, and I share Adam's pessimism here that this might go on for the next 5 years or so. So this whole mentality that we have about sustainability that is already in the past, is this still you think going to be viable in the future, since the title of our volume is really looking at sustainability towards the future? Are there any sustainable ideas that we had in the past that are still I mean, we ended because we ended with our essays ended with something like this was what happened in 2019. Although in our editorial, Gerry and I mentioned that, of course, these sustainable principles, ideas, and projects that we're still doing, and now that we're in a volatile state, that things are up in the air. I guess my question is, do you think these things that we've been thinking about last year, have you thought about it this year, and are these principles or design directions that you're thinking of right now, can they still be useful in the future post pandemic?
In our case, I'd just like to contribute a little bit for that. I mean, in Alex and in my case, I think when we talk about sustainability, we're not really talking specifically about a material response to this idea of sustainability. I think that's one way of approaching the issue through the material basis of what we can do, and we appreciate that as well. Definitely, that's a big part of it. But I think our focus primarily has to do with the sustainability on a community level, so that it's actually also about challenging a way of producing things, or the aspect of how we can create something in a more sustainable way, relying on the resources that the community has, which are not necessarily only material. And it's like a reliance on the social relationships and a reliance on knowledge, which is equally shared among equals. And I think that's a different way of seeing it, because I think now the pandemic has taught us. Um, I see that there is a new condition that we are in now, but I don't see that there's a systemic change that has really happened out of it yet. So, like, the things which are in place are still in place. The people who have the power still have the power. Corporations still have that power to govern us or corporations and politicians and governments still have the same amounts of power and even more. So I think when we're talking about what can change after this, it's kind of difficult to see that some things will really change in a massive way. I don't think, I mean, maybe that's also a pessimistic view, but some things will change. But as the essence, I think nothing will really change unless we find a way to really approach the systems that the systems that we have, that we can produce, our things in a different way. So showing alternative ways of production, alternative modes of thinking about the way that we do things is something that we can all do at our stage now. Maybe it's a good time to do that. But unless we do that, I think nothing will really change that much.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, on a positive note, I think it's still continuing. Like me and Alex, I think we'll still continue, of course, thinking about these things and see how we can expand on the projects that we're doing now that are mostly on a community level. But we think that there's role to do that, and hopefully, if we're able to crack this problem, hopefully be able to do that on a larger scale, maybe working with larger developers, but seeing still how a community can play a larger role in that.
What's really interesting, maybe what is gonna, or maybe has the potential to incite some kind of change, is the fact that we're experiencing this all over the world. We're all experiencing the same pandemic, and we're all going through this kind of consequences of that. Of course, different contexts, different consequences of it, but all part of it. So I think what's interesting is really how can that generate some kind of global discussion about what's kind of the consequences of this on a local level also. It's kind of there's a potential, but yeah, nothing has changed yet, I guess, like Sira says.
Yeah. The reason why I think June wanted to raise that question, because when the pandemic happened, June and I were talking, and we decided that as editors, we really should address the present, what's happening today, even if the essays were written months before the pandemic. We had to rewrite our introductory essay to include our thoughts and about the pandemic. And so that's the reason why we're also wanting to know how you guys are dealing with not just what's happening today, but the next 2 years or 3 years, hopefully not that long.
Hi, may I make a comment?
Yes,
okay. I really like what Lulu said. You look for how to work with your hands. And in bamboo architecture, it's all about that, no? From harvesting to treating to processing, etc. You work with your hands. And the other thing that I'm experiencing now is I have several clients, and some clients came in during the pandemic, and
Wow.
I'm I'm interested in observing how the islands are becoming more insular. Like for example,
Ah,
we're harvesting in Verde Islands 600 pieces of bamboo, and the barangays don't want to let us inside to check the bamboos because we're from Metro Manila. It's very, very interesting, right? So
that's
you can see
interesting.
that there
Yes.
will be, it's baliktad. I mean, it's different now. They sort of shun Metro Manilans from going inside the island, and I hope this makes them more introspective in what their products can become and how they can live. Yeah. Anyway, just that, those two things.
One of the staying back with Ning, please. One of the things that we first talked about Ning when we were having that first ever meeting that we had so many months ago. It felt like years ago. Was diba? Was the fact that you said something about this insular, and it's such a very interesting idea kasi for me. Um, when you were talking to other people outside of the country, you mentioned that they're surprised that we live in bamboo houses.
In bamboo house, yes,
In
yes,
bamboo
we still
houses.
do. Yes, that's very surprising. And then I would honestly have a thesis on that. We have we have several kinds of IQs, right, in the countries all over the world, right? But one of the high IQs of the Filipino is spiritual IQ, and we take this for granted. But like, we always have God in the equation. Like for example, Pacquiao, when he wins a fight, I would like to thank God. Or when someone wins a beauty contest, I would like to thank God, and so forth and so on. When somebody robs a bank, I would like to thank God. I mean, this is really happening. And bamboo, of all the materials, is the most spiritual. And I would love to see that connection. How this pervades, because like when uh, I would interview in the mountains, uh, houses, no, residents who live in bamboo houses. Some would have their children in the United States studying masteral, but they live in bamboo houses. So it's very interesting that they go back somehow into a simple, frugal, and hardworking lifestyle. And they don't mind living, or they love living in a bamboo house. Yeah, a little bit
But
of a
also
take
from
there.
yes, but also from the point of view of I guess difference, right? You mentioned to me before that it's a novelty to other to cultures outside of the Philippines to live in a bamboo. But for us here, we take it for granted that
We
our
take it for
being
granted, yes. Yeah. And in fact, like also among Southeast Asian neighbors, they don't really live in full bamboo houses, and they won't be comfortable. But we are one culture that houses and
yes,
are
that
comfortable in it. That's very interesting, right? Very interesting
yes, and
data.
it's actually an insight that I think that I'm starting to appreciate now, where we can actually teach others that look, this is one kind of difference that we have, maybe as Filipinos, maybe as Southeast Asians, we don't know yet, but maybe you should think about it right now, because at this point we are really thinking about differences. We are now
Yeah.
becoming more and more insular and looking at our surroundings. There's really I'm particularly one of those who would say there's really nothing wrong about being different. So yes, that's a really
Yeah.
good insight.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also think, thank
Yes.
you, King, for those insights. But when you're relating about us having still living in bamboo houses, I think post-pandemic, when the air-conditioned space is not anymore seen as ideal, in fact, it's seen as a health hazard, perhaps it is
Exactly. Yeah.
an
You're right.
opportune
Yeah.
time for the exploration of bamboo and tropical architecture, and to further,
Very interesting. Yeah. And
yeah,
as you
yeah,
said, who would take this on? Like for example, I was telling you that interestingly, clients have been asking me to do bamboo projects, right? And then that client who asked me said his daughter comes in from the UK and says, and then she tells her father, well, I want to be sustainable. I want a bamboo house. And, if this pandemic did not come, he will not listen to her. There you
Yeah.
go. That's really
So,
interesting, right? A 24-year-old kid tells her father, I want a bamboo house. And he listens to her. That makes sense. There you go. So that's
the,
one client.
There's one thing I want to ask Adam also. Really want to hear you expand on this. The Because you mentioned something about egalitarianism and that but egalitarianism, that this practice of zine making is basically the essence of. But I think also, in addition, not but in addition to that, I'd also like to think that uh, the form and the content um, are sometimes two opposing things. That's why we think of zines as independent and this as ano. But now that we're, for instance, in the future, or at least in the immediate future, when classes start, um, and if there are no books that will arrive in all these communities that is so far away from the center, they will have to actually become the producers of these knowledge, also local, in connection to what we were talking about with Ning. Local also, maybe they can produce content with the form of these, should I say, anarchic materials. Would you like to say something, Adam, about this?
That is actually the dream for our project now, with a collective that I work with. That's a dream, to be able to uh, stimulate enough local producers, artists, writers, publishers, poets, everything, comic book artists, etc., to stimulate enough of these people, in their own collectives, in their own places, in their own communities, to start producing work that addresses their own specific situations, their own specific problems for that community. So yeah, the problem right now really is, and at least with regards to how we used to do it, is how to organize these collectives. A lot of the a lot of these things that we're doing right now by way of coping with the pandemic is very individualized. The problem with, at least the problem that we're facing, people who, the small press uh, community here, is a lot of our work relies on community building. So all these individuals, what we're doing is uh, connecting them to each other, so they become collectives, and these collectives connect each other, so they become bigger collectives. So it'll be in a way a mass movement of mostly, lack of a better term, zinesters, doing a lot of these things, sending out a lot of messages, so things can happen. I know what's good for Manila people can also be good for Bicol people. What's good for Bicol people can also be good to Mindanao people. Tapos we try to make connections happen between all these people, and a lot of these things happen when you organize actual events in actual physical space. Na we all know we can't do right now, and we probably won't be able to do in the next 3 to 5 years. So if you put that in that context, in the context of a community, and an IP community in Mindanao, and how something that kunyari, that a person from Baguio knows how to do, that would be advantageous to the people for that IEP community of like 50 people in Mindanao, and how to make that connection. So that's the problem right now, is more often than not, these IP communities, they don't have internet connection. Supposedly, around a certain percentage, a majority of the Filipinos now are connected through our telephones, na through the internet. But the bigger problem is that 30%. Supposedly it's 70%. Last I checked, 70%. The bigger problem is that 30%. They're the people who need connection the most. At least that's what I think. So barring these oh, kasi in a situation where these people don't have internet connection, what you can have is you send someone out there and educate them, tell them how to make these things, and stimulate them and show them that they can do these things for themselves, and it becomes sustainable. But again, we still don't know how to do that given our pandemic situation. So yeah, and so again, I'm not that optimistic yet. I'm still trying to figure these things out with a bunch of people. Hopefully, we get to a place where we can start doing something. I mean, if we need to do it by Zoom, we'll do it by Zoom. I hope not. I hope we find a different platform. But then, so hopefully it'll happen before the year is out.
Thank you, Adam. Just as a follow-up also for, I guess, for everyone, I'm taking off from Ning's observation that the islands are becoming more insular with the pandemic. I just want to ask everybody if you are looking at beyond the central city of Metro Manila when it comes to work and when it comes to project. If you are setting your sights now beyond the Imperial Manila in the next few years, I'd be interested to find out. Maybe Lulu? I see your work as really very Manila-centric, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, maybe you're wrong, right? No, actually, Manila is sort of the center for retail. But in terms of making, like my makers, a lot of them, they're from Cavite, uh, and Laguna. And the piñas are, of course, in Calibo, in Aklan, right? The weavers, yeah. So they're really outside Manila. But I feel the next thing that personally that I would want to do with some of my peers probably is to be able to convince or to inspire the younger generations of the same um, industry. Um, it's very important that it is in their education, the craft that is still very much our traditional part of our tradition. But I think they have taken that out from the school curriculum. So now that YouTube seems to be the tool for all the youngsters, I think one way that we could connect with them is through YouTube, but connecting also with the school, with the local schools in the provinces. Yeah. And you sort of have to make it interesting to them, but you are actually creating awareness of the beauty of the craft and that they can modernize it. In my experience also, I noticed that actually the LGUs, they are still good, some good people in government, though I know what it's like today. There's so much politics also when we get to Congress, because that's what we're trying to do. That's why we needed to research on the laws, because there are really laws that are protecting us, but we are not reading about it. Because our profession has nothing really to do with the law. But you realize that you can actually tap the LGUs, and they know if you know, and they have the budget. It's just that you just have to find a way how to take it from them for the community and give them a little bit of credit. That's all they need, I guess, some credit that it's their, the budget came from them and all that. So I think that's one major step, is really getting involved with the communities and the LGUs. The Manila Imperial at the moment, I think, is still a good market to tap, but it also takes a community of creatives like us who will be able to convince them. We just have to be a little bit faster than, let's say I'm in fast fashion, I just have to be faster than the fast fashion in terms of talking about or spreading the good news about sustainability, maybe more IG posts, more Facebook posts, which is not so much my thing, but that seems to be able to influence the younger generation. So like now I have I'm working on an online collection, and wherein I'm using indigo. So it's just indigo and organic materials like cotton and silk, but they're all scraps. So that's like you call that, it's still sustainable fashion because you're upscaling, you're what do you call it? Upcycling. You call that upcycling. So I'm using the scraps that I have, which is, I have like 100 supots of scraps from the time that I started using woven materials. Because in knitting, I don't have much, what do you call this, wastage. Because we knit it to the shape of the garment. In weaving, you actually cut, so there's those little parts of fabrics, and I've kept almost 99% of it. So today I'm using it all together. And I'm coming up with this online thing. And I also collaborated with Hamu. Do you know the two student designers, Hamu from Benil?
Yep.
Yeah. I decided to do like Uniqlo has this XX thing with these young designers, and now we have this Tan-Gan X Hamu.
Nice. Yeah.
All one ex Benil student. His name is Mimi Yu. He's now an influencer with like over 1 million followers. So I message him, "Hello, can you help? Promote sustainability in fashion," because that's what they also learned in Benil when I was still with Benil, right? So, and he saw indigenous. I don't know if you've seen his post. He's so funny.
Yes. I think with what you said, Lulu, it just underlines the shift also and the importance of social media nowadays.
Right.
Regardless of what people are now saying, that they say we should all watch The Social Dilemma because it's going to give us a job. But in the pandemic, I think the power of social media has been highlighted more and more. And I don't know if there is a way back, or maybe we can also use it as what you are doing to promote the messages that we need to say and to deliver. In my case, because I do exhibits, physical exhibits, I've had to be very agile in terms of reacting to the pandemic. And I am still learning as I go along. I'm still exploring what can be done. But I think this pandemic has also given us the opportunity to rethink and re-educate and to reassess where we are right now and what we're doing. So maybe that's a good thing.
I think we just have to be a little bit more visible and aggressive to promote what we are doing right now, because it's very easy to be overpowered by the big corporations.
Yes.
And if you can influence influencers that the trend is to go sustainable. I mean, if nobody's telling them, then they just follow whatever the big corporations would offer them. It keeps them grounded if you are constantly in touch with them. It's only through the youth that we will be able to move forward or move our message forward. Yeah, we cannot keep it to ourselves or just in our book.
Definitely. That's why we teach.
Yeah. It must be very frustrating for Dan and Dan regards to the plastics that's so overwhelming now.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
At the start of the pandemic, we actually had to get in touch with our friends from design studios in Cebu and in different parts of Manila, how they're doing as a business or even their mental health, how they're coping with the work. And what we found was that um, a lot adjust differently. Some are very productive. Some have taken, it has really taken a toll on them emotionally to do the work. But as we keep on having conversations also with friends in Cebu, how they're doing, we found that just being able to talk and to share our experiences, what's happening, just sharing knowledge, and to find that in itself was helpful, I think, as a community, especially when we struggle with almost the same thing. Like ECQ lockdown rin in Cebu and just sending stuff to friends, packages to know that we think of them and we're trying to take care of everybody in a way that we could. If we can send work their way or just share this knowledge for us right now, especially in a very emergency mode thing, because we don't know, because we're still in the middle of the pandemic. That seems to be like the sustainable kind of help that we're also doing to within our community and also with the businesses that we work with who are also in reactionary mode at the moment.
Yeah, to add to what Dang said, I think one of the things that happened is, yeah, everyone's insular physically, but we actually became a bit more connected online. Because when the pandemic happened, the first thing that we did, kunwari, me personally and si Dang, was to reach out to all the different design studios, the small studios, and talk about how we can be sustainable at this time and maybe share notes on how to do it. Because we're just a few, like graphic design studios here in the Philippines. So parang how can we navigate towards this pandemic? And until now, we're still talking. I mean, before naman, we used to talk, but it became a bit bigger from Cagayan de Oro. So kind of connecting each other and how we can be sustainable. And also the funny thing about like our industry, like graphic design, communication design, is the the setup is we need clients. I mean, we can do projects on our own, but we need clients, and our clients don't have money now. So what we're doing is we're doing projects for some of our clients pro bono or halos walang budget or hulugan, parang 0% interest or anything that would, make them start things and start businesses. And that's how we, I guess, nag-change yung sustainability in a way in that particular setting, how to sustain a business.
Concluding messages from the section editors.
To wrap up, I'd just like to thank all our writers and designers who have said yes to become writers. I know it's not easy for us designers to write. I've had this experience a number of times in Binilde when I asked the teachers of design to write, and it's always, a struggle. But thank you so much for saying yes, all of you. I think we have a anthology that we can be proud of, and I hope that you can share it with your circles and with your communities so that the conversation on sustainability and climate change and design and taking care of the environment can continue. So thank you so much. I hope this is not the last. I remember at the start of this project, I promised everyone that uh, we will all gather together physically and talk to each other. I hope that this group of arts can become a catalyst for future dialogues that we can host in Benil. I mean, the Center for Campus Art can host some sort of talk or dialogues involving all of us, and hopefully this can be a start. But I also like to thank, of course, Japan Foundation Manila, Mariko especially, and her team for being very patient with me and June and with all of us. Thank you so much. And finally, we're seeing the end of the rainbow. So thank you. I also believe that as designers, we have much to say moving forward in the post pandemic future and seeing that the virus is potentially a constant in our lives for the next few years, I believe that as designers, we can step up once again, offer, if not offer solutions to problems, at least find a way to craft a better future for all of us. So I just like to end with that. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, June, also. Thank you.
We have seen the beginning of this decade 2020, the rise of a new global condition of volatility. It's the spread of the new SARS-CoV virus and the disease that continues to scare us, the COVID-19 disease. And this is something our generation have never experienced before. When we were all writing our individual essay assignments, it seemed like the next decade will be full of optimism, and we were wrong. Yet Gerry and I also gave the assumption that that volatility is our contemporary condition. So we were kind of preparing ourselves as well. So so while we were reassessing the relevance of the theme around this past February this year, we thought that the significance of the designers and of design itself will be diminished as we all went through oppressive lockdowns. We've seen, however, or at least here in the Philippines, that the designers were indeed one of the first responders to this volatile condition. Architects and space designers offered help in retooling hospitals and their triages. Product designers fabricated face shields, while fashion designers produced personal protective suits for our frontliners. Graphic designers deployed easy information through graphics to the public, something so useful now in the midst of misinformation, even about the disease. The term bayanihan is no longer just a word left as a local vernacular term. It became part of our recent law, or laws, actually. It was deployed as a national offering to committed help, even often without the help of governing agencies. It is to this note that we end this brief launch with a look towards the future. We will start public schools soon, and perhaps indeed these zines and self-made packets with educational content will help our educators in the next school year or years. Perhaps it will be very proper to look at our gardens, plant bamboo, and use them together with other sustainable and cheap materials as part of our spaces and our architecture, if not our lives. Our future might indeed be sustainable if these considerations for mitigating new disruptions brought about by more volatilities are part of our daily design thinking. So we end this by saying that we hope our future plans hold sustainable so we can narrate them to our children in the future, that our sustainable present as configured now, as we said in the title, will be narrated by design. In behalf of the Japan Foundation Manila office and my co-editor Gerry Torres, I am June Hines, and I thank you for the privilege of sharing our narratives with you. Have a good day, everyone.
This has been the virtual book launching of Art Archive 3 featuring design. Please like and subscribe our YouTube channel as well as our Vimeo account. To download our collection, visit us on our official website. Thank you very much.